What is up, guys, and thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about the Fujifilm 10-24mm f4 OIS lens. So the reason why I want to talk about this lens is because I use it almost every time I go to shoot. Not every time, but a good majority of my photos are actually taken with that lens. So I figured, let's do a little bit of review on it. I've owned it for a while now. I've put it through its paces. I've seen where it struggles. I've seen where it really excels. And I've also used other lenses that are similar to this in the Fujifilm lineup that I can kind of weigh in on, and maybe if you're deciding or trying to decide between those two lenses, maybe if this lens is a better choice, or maybe go with a different one. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Alrighty, so this lens is a crop sensor lens. So if this is your first video, your first kind of little step into looking into the Fujifilm lineup and the Fujifilm systems, they only make APS-C cameras or they make medium format cameras. They don't make full frames, they don't make micro four thirds. That's the two sensor sizes that they make. So with that being said, when we look at the lenses, we have to look at them at the 35mm equivalent side of things. So a 10-24mm with the crop factor is really going to give you about a 15 to 36mm focal length full frame. So if we're switching from a full frame system, going to an XT3 or an XT4 or whatever X model you're looking at, keep that in mind. The lenses are actually designed for that in mind. So that's one really cool thing I liked about this lens, is that they didn't just give us a 16 to 35 or they didn't give us a 15 to 35. They gave us something that was going to equal out to that same focal length, which I really like. Now, with that being said, obviously being a wide angle lens, this is going to be ideal for landscape photography, real estate photography, vlogging to some degree. It's not going to give you the best depth of field, so there's not going to be that separation, but it is going to be a good wide angle lens for vlogging. Or shoot a landscape in that fashion. So the maximum aperture on this one is f4. So this is not going to be something you would take for astrophotography. This is not something you would take for really low light type of photography work. But for landscape photography and real estate photography, I think this is actually pretty nice. Because at least at f4 you do get, some good depth of field, but it's nothing too crazy. For me, I always shoot at f4 for my landscapes, or a little bit higher, maybe to f8 or f16. But normally my landscape photos are actually shot at f4. So I love the manual aperture ring on here, but one thing I just really wish they would have added to this was going to be the actual stops on there. So that way if you're at f4, if you're at f10, f16. Some Fujifilm lenses have that, some do not. My 16 to 55 2.8 does have that on there, and I really do like that because I know what aperture I'm set at before I even turn on the camera. Now, one thing that I just really wish Fuji would have done with this lens. Now maybe they did it just to keep costs down, and it's not a cheap lens, but it's also not terribly expensive. I really wish they would have just added a weather sealing gasket, just because I do take this sometimes in not the most favorable conditions. So sometimes it's raining, I've taken it out when it's snowing, I've gotten a lot of dust on it before, so it doesn't make me feel super confident, but I have had no issues with it as of right now. So let me knock on some wood, hold on. So that's one good thing. Now, if you buy it from a retailer that offers a protection plan on it, I would highly suggest getting that, just because if it does get ruined by water, snow, dirt, whatever, dropping it, it's more than likely going to be covered. Either no money out of pocket besides what you paid for the plan, or maybe a small fraction as a deductible. So that's one thing I do really recommend. Or maybe they'll make a second version of it, crossing my fingers, that does have weather resistance built into it, has some gaskets on it. If not, maybe you are more inclined to getting the 8 to 16mm f2.8. That is weather resistant, but there are some drawbacks in my opinion to that lens. Damn, this one's good. And since I did briefly mention the 8 to 16mm, One thing that I kind of want to touch on that one, because that's another lens that I've used, and that was a lens that was in my radar when I was looking at buying my first wide angle for Fujifilm. So the 8 to 16 millimeter is sharper from corner to corner. That's one thing, you can't get around it. It is an extremely sharp lens. You cannot use circular filters on there. For me, it's not a huge deal, but sometimes I do use the 10 to 24 for vlogging, so I don't know how I would be able to put like an ND filter on there without it looking so large and massive. So that's one downside in my opinion. But now, if I was going to buy one, I would have no problem using drop-in filters for landscape photography. I don't know if I would want to get rid of the 10 to 24 just because of that. And one other thing about that drop-in filter for that lens specifically, at least the ones I've looked at, you have to get them like special ordered, so you can't really return them if you don't want them, which is kind of, you know, nerve-wracking because you're going to spend a decent amount of change on that filter system. It is a faster lens, so it is an f2.8 at its maximum aperture versus f4, so that is one pro. It's definitely going to be better for low light. I've used it for astrophotography, which I will put some photos up here so you can see that as well. I do really like that lens. I would still maybe prefer the 16mm f1.4 for astro, which is probably gonna be my next lens I purchase, just because I do like having the more light coming through and being a faster lens. I'm okay with a 16mm on there, even though it's like a 24mm 35mm equivalent, so I'm okay with that. I don't really like to go super wide. If anything, I might just do a pano or something like that, or stitch some photos together to get a really wide angle shot for my astro work if needed. There is no stabilization built into that lens. It is weather sealed now, but you do not have any kind of stabilization built into it. So again, it's not a huge thing, but I like to shoot without a tripod often, so if I can, I'm all for it. So that lens being not optically stabilized kind of is a bummer, especially with being such a premium Fuji lens. Maybe there'll be a version 2 that does have it, but I don't know, probably not. And finally, that bad boy comes in at a weight of almost double the 10 to 24. So backpacking with it, hiking with it, putting onto a smaller XT series body, it's very front heavy. It does have the bulbous actual front element on there, so it's a huge lens, it really is. And not that that's a bad thing. I do enjoy big hefty glass, it just feels nice in the hand, but it is huge. Its actual weight of it actually comes in at 805 grams, so it is massive. It's double the 10 to 24 in weight. Now myself, having used both the 8 to 16mm and the 10 to 24mm, it's kind of, I was really torn when I was deciding which one I should buy. So I think I will ultimately buy the 8 to 16mm f2.8 when I get my hands on the X-T4. Now, not right away. I probably will sell the 10 to 24 and then just buy the new drop-in filter set, because at that point I'm really hoping that I can use my 16 to 55 as my vlogging lens. That's what I'm filming right now on, just because it does have that nice depth of field. Having the IBIS built into the X-T4, I think it would just pair nicer than the 10 to 24. I would get a little bit better of that separation from myself in the background. Hopefully it's wide enough to make the viewers feel a little bit more engaged and a little bit more involved in what's going on, so it's not as tight, hopefully. I mean, right now it's on a tripod, obviously, so I can push a little bit further away. It's definitely further than how my arm stretches out. It's a little bit extra cash. I mean, you can find them used for about $1,500 versus the $1,000 that the 10 to 24 is, which is a steal, honestly. It's a phenomenally sharp lens. I love it, I really do. Everything about it is really, really nice. It's just kind of with that sharp glass. I mean, when I shot Sony, I always had G Master glass, so not saying the Fujinon glass is not sharp no matter which one you get, because honestly, it really is. I mean, I've never seen a kit lens like the 18 to 55. That thing is incredible, like really incredible. I can't believe they have such a great lens on there as a kit lens. I mean, come on, let's be real. With that being said, like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll definitely see you guys later. Peace out.